a lot of people don't realize that there has been a law school or legal education in Little Rock for over 100 years. Now, for most of that time, it was a private institution, and it went through several manifestations. But in 1967, a part-time program from the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville Law School was established in Little Rock. And in 1974, pursuant to an act of the legislature, the UALR Law School was created, affiliated with UALR, and had a full-time program. So since 1975, then, we have been who we are, the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and we've had both a full-time and a part-time program. And that's really shaped our history. Our location here in Little Rock and our relationship with UALR as a metropolitan institution and our history as a part-time school has really shaped our values and who we've become. Pad, you see the values that we recognize as integral to our operation of professionalism, public service, and access to justice. Let's talk about how those values work in relation to our program. Access to justice. First of all, the part-time program gives us an opportunity to reach many other people. But more importantly, our location in Little Rock connects us to the court system, the legislature, business, finance, the opportunities to work with advocacy organizations. There are enormous opportunities for our students simply by virtue of where we are located, both to network and gain experience in law school and to pursue interesting careers thereafter. That location then really makes it important for us to capitalize on what we have in Little Rock. And so we have tried to create innovative programs, we've tried to create innovative curricula that allow our students to connect to the opportunities in Little Rock that forge the commitment to access to justice. In addition, we have one of the lowest tuition costs in the United States. And that accounts for why in the past several years, 2/3 of our applications have come from out-of-state students. This past year we received the largest number of applications ever. It's roughly 12 applications for every available seat. And most of those applications are from out-of-state students who recognize two things. What they've told us in focus groups. They recognize our value, tuition value, but they also recognize the value of being in the capital city. And so those two things are really generating a lot of interest from students across the country. And it's hard to even say where most of those applications come from. They come from all over. Students see the value, come to Little Rock, and then stay because they like what they found here. We also offer students one of the best clinical programs in the country. We, at the moment, have 3 different clinical opportunities, and that is where students can work under the supervision of practicing attorneys on the law school staff, representing real clients. So it's not a fake or simulated course. This is the real thing. And our students get opportunities to work in the litigation clinic, in a mediation clinic, and representing low-income taxpayers. We hope to grow those programs in the future and add additional programs that look at what we need here in Little Rock and take advantage of other programs. So we've talked about a nonprofit clinic that would help represent or advise nonprofit organizations. And that need was brought to my attention yet again just the other day when I noticed that there are several hundred nonprofit associations in Arkansas that have failed to file the tax forms that the recent tax changes have required. And so there's a great need because many of the nonprofits in Arkansas are small and they do good work, but they don't have the resources to employ a big law firm to take care of those interests. So those are the sorts of programs we're looking at to help expand and take advantage of our opportunities here, but also provide some access to justice. We also have very innovative externship program. Now, every other person in the world calls them internships, but for some reason, the American Bar Association makes us call these things externships. And it's just an internship where we place students outside the law school in some office. We have limited those placements, though, to public service externships, to locations in which there is a public service aspect. Government agencies, courts, the legislature, our students get the staff, legislative committees are in the session, which also builds not just on our commitment to access to justice, but on our public service orientation as well. We do not want to place students with private law firms. They can get paid to do that. We want, though, to have our students have an opportunity to reflect on the value of public service in a setting, in an educational setting. The second value, as I mentioned, is our public service value. And that is typified by the kind of work our students do. We have hundreds of students who devote hundreds of hours a year to volunteer in public service activities. We give them a certificate at graduation if they meet certain requirements. If they serve 100 volunteer hours, they get a certificate. They have 300 hours, they get a distinguished certificate, which I always wondered what the difference was, and when I became dean, I discovered that it has the word distinguished on it. And I thought, you know, for 300 hours, you ought to get maybe a fancier piece of paper. But for our students, it's not the piece of paper, but it's the commitment and what they do. We have begun a program of recognition of outstanding public service work by our students, by our alumni, and by our faculty. So every year, we have an annual luncheon to hopefully raise some money for scholarships, but also to recognize people from those three groups who have devoted significant time and energy to public service work. This past year, we recognized posthumously Judge Rofe, recognized my predecessor, Dean Goldner, Chuck Goldner, for the work he's done with the Access to Justice Commission and the Professionalism Practicum and the American Bar Association, and his list goes on and on. The enormous work he's done nationally and locally in devoting himself to doing good for the system of justice and for legal education. And then our student, Reese Howard, who spent a summer volunteering in a Navy JAG office because she wanted some legal experience, but she also wanted to do something worthwhile for that summer. I thought it was remarkable, first of all, that she would volunteer for the whole summer, but that she would choose to travel away from town and volunteer in that setting. So we wanted to recognize those people for what they do. And every year, we hope to continue that program to make it clear that we put a value on public service. And we want to make that a public recognition. And then finally, our value of professionalism grows again out of where we've been and who we are. Our placements and our externships, our connections to the Bar Association. We have one of the only joint academic and county bar association law libraries in the country, and that is a big thing because it prevents us from becoming an exclusively academic library and forces the law school to continue to think about our obligations to the community. Because as a public library, we have to be available both to the public and to the county bar lawyers who need that. And that means that a significant portion of the reference work by our librarians is devoted to pro se patrons. That is, people who are representing themselves in some legal matter, who don't have the resources to afford an attorney. And that's an important part of our mission. And the reason why I say that it's not always the case is we recently went through our American Bar Association site accreditation visit. And they always assign somebody to be responsible for reviewing each area. And the library person, who was a very experienced librarian but came from an academic library, was horrified that we would have pro se patrons wandering around the building taking up staff time. And we all nodded politely and said, thank you for that comment, because we intend to continue our public service orientation and our professionalism within the library. We need to be both, and our library is a good example of how that works.